Hey guys, so I'm just at a pull-off on the side of South Rocking Chair Ranch Road, and a lot of beautiful scenery along this road. You have the Mingus Mountains and just a lot of beautiful desert colors, a little more washed out and high key. It's mid-morning, the sun is really strong, and I've got a little thumbnail sketch that I'm going to share with you guys. It's a big part of my process, and I'll go a little bit more into who I kind of learned that from and why it helps in the video. So hope you enjoy something a little different, and see you next time. So this is my little thumbnail sketch, and it's through Adventure of Painting, an online course with Scott Christensen. And I'll leave that link in the description of the video here. But essentially, I do little thumbnail sketches occasionally, and they really help when I'm kind of trying to plan out the composition and the value structure before sketching it out on the panel. So now that I've stained my 12 by 12 inch wood panel, I'm kind of laying in just the general masses here. And I've got this kind of group mass of trees, which is the focal point of the scene. And the foreground is kind of leading you into the Mingus Mountains behind the trees, which create more depth and interest. I really love the shape of this tree, and that's a little bit why I'm choosing to concentrate on it. And the colors are kind of really bright and a little bit flat right now. So my main contrast is going to be this tree here, the darker areas of the tree. And really just kind of sketching in the core shadows. So even just from the pen drawing, you can see the group mass of foliage is the darkest area. The mountains are going to be the next darkest area, and then the sky and the ground plane are the lightest parts of the painting. And the ground plane, I have a little bit more of a diagonal in the painting here. So I think it leads you in and is a little bit more dynamic than the thumbnail. In the thumbnail sketch, it's kind of just more of a parallel plane and creates kind of a repetitive shape to that line of the ridge line of the mountains. So sometimes I'll make multiple thumbnail sketches to work through ideas, or I'll just see maybe in the main thumbnail generally what I like about it and make adjustments based on what I'd like to change. So I'm never, simply just copying what's in front of me, copying what's in the thumbnail sketch. I'm kind of using all of this as information that gets me closer to the heart of what I'm trying to communicate. And you want to be just kind of open like that. Painting really is a series of questions that you're responding to, and you never want to get too fixed in your approach, your concept, and your execution. You want to have this kind of plasticity to how you're working. And that's what keeps it kind of fun and fresh as well. I've decided to balance this group mass
with a rock that's in the foreground. And because it's kind of backlit, more side lit, but the angle of the rock is really backlit. So that kind of balances out that group mass. And if the group mass was a little bit more centrally located, I don't really think I would need to balance it as much. But I feel like this kind of creates a nice diagonal area of interest. And you're kind of, in a way, zigzagging your way through the scene now. It just that little piece of information creates kind of an S-curve into the scene. And even though I love this area of foliage here, what I'm really interested in is the beyond. So that sense of, you know, what's beyond the edge of this foreground, kind of dropping into that distant wilderness. So I'm pushing the yellow a bit on the brush beneath the tree, and then adding more violet to that mountain color. So when you look at this scene in person, it feels like there could be a lot of like grays and browns. But with plein air, I'm always interested in how I can push those color relationships. And of course, yellow and purple are really beautiful complements. So that's kind of an idea that I'm playing with in this scene here. There's just a range of really beautiful pastels. And making sure that I've got a little bit of that violet cast mixed into my sky color so that it harmonizes a bit more with the mountains back here. And then I love to mix a bit of the sky color into the ridgeline, lighten that up a little to create more depth. But making sure that I'm keeping the values separate still. So, you know, those mountains are darker than the sky, and then the tree, that value is darker, but the bushes below that are like more airy and getting hit with more direct light, those actually are more of a similar value to the mountains behind. So that core shadow and the edge of the tree is going to kind of be what separates it from the background. And right now I'm just making sure that I'm keeping the paint a little bit thinner so that I can go back in and fill up this tree a bit more. Right now it's got, you know, too many sky holes. It looks a little bit, you know, too thinned out right now. So I'm going to kind of exaggerate the fullness of it a bit more once I get in the sky. And then that lighter kind of airier feeling from the contour of the tree meeting the sky, I can kind of blend the two and get that middle value. This foliage here just has so much character. You can feel how it's been kind of windswept and dried out, and just it's withstanding the elements. And I think that that's so beautiful when painting in the desert. You just kind of marvel at how life persists here. And you know, you develop so much reverence for this landscape. You know, it's fragile, but at the same time, it's so resilient. So this ground plane is just so bright. When you look at it, it's almost a little bit blinding. So I've really got a lot of white mixed into this color here. But I've actually mixed a bit of yellow and red into it. Otherwise, it would just be too white, like snow or something. You've got a little bit of some of those cast shadows from the grasses that are down below, and then that rock is casting a bit of a shadow. So it's pretty blue against that kind of really light ground color. And I've got more of my red, yellow, blue mixture going on in all of these colors really because of all the neutrals. So even though like I am still pushing the color, I've kind of desaturated a lot here to communicate that washed out pastel feeling of the desert. So even though, you know, the mountains are trending towards violet, I've still got a little bit of yellow in there. And so on. And putting a little bit of those, I guess they'd be called ground holes. I've never heard it called that before, but similar with the tree, you kind of pop in maybe where that ground is showing through some of the foliage down below. And that usually tends to be, you know, not quite as bright as what's out in the open. But everything is super airy, and I have to make sure that I'm not, you know, copying exactly and just filling out some of these shapes a little bit more than what I'm actually seeing. And you can see that I've put a little bit of brush where the foreground meets the middle ground there. And that creates a little bit of a transition. Otherwise it feels like it just kind of drops off. But I'm not making it too big because I still want you to feel like you can enter into the mountains from this platform. You really do get that sense that you're like on the edge of a big hill or cliff, which I am right now. And this rock here is kind of like a rim rock. It's really hard and there's a lot of clay. Kind of crumbly. And you'll see how I'm kind of going back and forth with my marks. There's this vegetation kind of sprinkled on the ground here, and figuring out how much is too much, what I can do to just communicate the openness, but not have it be too stark. So a lot of what painting is for me is just putting down marks and then kind of responding to them. But obviously you have a general sense of your design scheme and your values and the colors that you're drawn to. That mixture of white and yellow that I'm laying on top of the ground here is reinforcing this upward kind of slope and also bringing that foreground a little bit closer. And then where the cliff recedes, I'm adding a bit more red. So, general rule of thumb, it's the colors that drop off are first yellow, then red, then blue. So keeping in mind that, as things recede, there is kind of a color and a temperature shift. And that helps to just create that atmospheric perspective.
And even those shadows that are slightly being casted closer up front here, they're going to be a little bit less like the violet in the background. And they're going to have a little more of like an orangey cast. A little bit more of kind of a blue-orange up front here, rather than that violet blue that's further in the distance. And I've really kind of masked out a lot of my foreground brush here. So now, I still have to go into the main tree, that kind of main focal point, and get that wispy, lighter color going and just kind of fill in that mass a bit more. So this green here has, maybe a little bit more red mixed into it to kind of desaturate it a little. Otherwise, it is my most true green of the scene here. The foliage underneath is a bit more yellow and definitely a lot warmer and lighter. And even still, adding white will desaturate as well. So, you kind of look at white as a color not to use when you're really trying to have clean colors. But if you're looking to desaturate a color even more, adding white is how you do it. So it can really be skillfully employed in a lot of ways. And of course, we need it for creating more of those highlights. And so as I'm feathering that tree out a bit, I'm still figuring out where those sky holes want to be. And the mountain kind of shows through the lower part of the tree a bit. So this is edge work. You can tell that when I first laid in that tree shape, the edges were much harder. And now I'm kind of cleaning up those edges and making them softer. I also want to create a tiny bit of dimension in the Mangus Mountains. So going back in and lightening up some areas, giving the suggestion of where those plains are undulating and receding. So, again, lighter as I go back.
maybe where there's less vegetation, less direct light. And I'm also going back and kind of just repainting everything at this point because I started out quite thin. And if I forget to do that, it'll be pretty flat. So I want to get some texture and some body and lay that paint down thicker and, a little bit more intentionally at this point. So if you are really working from thin to thick and, maybe you hit the right color in your block in, but it's quite thin, I always try to go back and remix that color and lay it down thicker and then tweak it a little, see how it is relating to what I've put down next to it. So there's always like this push and pull. And it's a beautiful process of discovery. You'll notice I'm kind of really just repainting that whole tree. And, as I refine the painting more and more, I'm seeing that some of those darks really aren't that dark. So I'm lifting the value a little. Even though I've got a great area of contrast and a really great darker value in that tree, the whole painting feels pretty high key, like there's a lot of light in the scene. And that warm red that's in that foreground rock probably needs to be a bit more orange, but these are all the things that just take a little adjusting as you go. And like I said, the block in is kind of an estimate of everything. And then as you go in, you have to evaluate every aspect of the scene. And, sometimes when you leave some block in, it's because it was correct. But sometimes I simply just forget, to go back into a part of the painting. I get tunnel vision and maybe, work on one portion of the painting and choose to refine that more. And then I forget to go back to, something very small like the accent of the rock and, readdress that in relation to everything else. So it's important to stand back and just really look at every corner and every spot in the painting and, and look at the scene and see, is that, really what's going on here? Because what we're doing is observing nature, and she really gives the best instruction. So, if I'm stuck, if I'm like, I don't really know how light or how dark that is or what temperature this is, I look back at the scene. And being inventive is important for sure. That creativity is so important, but I really come to paint outside to learn from the natural world around me. And there's a point where you can get too much into your own head and your own idea and forget to just look around you and, see what it is that you're trying to recreate. And honestly, this study could have been finished a little while ago, and this is part of just that continued refining. but the plein air work is really just about the immediacy of getting down all the essentials. And I feel like that was accomplished pretty early on in the painting. So this has some really good notes on desert colors. And I enjoy the composition too. So the design and the color scheme is kind of where I want it to be. And at this point, I'm just kind of still making those refining touches and kind of the dark branches and some of the edges that are softer in the grasses. But yeah, this was a really fun session in Cottonwood, not too far from Sedona, and just gives you a really different perspective of the high desert here. It's interesting how just a slight shift in elevation and ecology really changes the scenery, and it's so beautiful to paint all the different treasures that are part of this landscape. Thank you guys so much for watching and being here with me, and I hope you enjoyed this journey a bit south of Sedona. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. All right, I'll see you guys next time.